My name is Booker. I am 68 years old, and I used to be a warehouse logistics manager down at the Port of Atlanta. Now I am just a retired man trying to survive in his own home. Every night I woke up and saw my wife standing beside my bed staring at me while I slept. Until the night I pretended to be asleep and heard what she whispered to me. Do you think you know the person sleeping next to you? I thought my wife Loretta was an angel sent from God to care for me in my old age. We spent 30 years together building a life in this house. But that image shattered the night I poured her special warm milk into the plant pot instead of drinking it. I lay there with my eyes closed, controlling my breathing just like I used to do during stressful shifts at the docks. I felt her shadow fall over me. She did not lean in to kiss my forehead. She leaned in to check if I was still breathing. The words she whispered into the darkness were colder than the grave. Before I tell you what she said and how I made them pay, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that betrayal from family cuts the deepest. To understand why that moment broke me, you have to understand what I gave to build this life. For 40 years, I punched the clock at the Port of Atlanta. While other men were sleeping in warm beds, I was out there in the humidity, organizing shipping containers and managing logistics until my knees felt like they were filled with broken glass. I breathed in diesel fumes and dust every single night so that I could buy this 2-story house. We bought it when this neighborhood was nothing but empty lots and hope. Now it is a prime location with coffee shops and high-rise condos going up around us. It is a gentrified gold mine. I did it for us. I did it for Loretta. I thought we would grow old here sitting on the porch watching the world go by. But 6 months ago, everything changed. The doctor sat us down and used big words like early onset cognitive decline and severe anxiety disorder. Suddenly, my hands started shaking in ways I could not control. I would walk into a room and forget why I was there. It was terrifying for a man who used to track thousands of shipments in his head to suddenly not remember where he put his keys. That is when Loretta took over. She became my nurse, my guardian, and my gatekeeper. She organized my pills. She cooked my meals. She even told me that my son Jamal could not come over anymore. She said Jamal upset me too much and that I needed peace and quiet. I believed her. I thought she was protecting me from stress. I did not realize she was isolating me from the only person who would actually notice what was happening. I felt guilty for being a burden. I would look at her tired eyes and think about how lucky I was to have a wife who stuck by a sick old man. I trusted her with my life. I trusted her with my medicine. I never suspected that the decline in my health was not natural. The air in the house shifted whenever Gavin came around. Gavin was Loretta's brother-in-law, the husband of her late sister. He was a white man, about 45 years old, with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He worked in finance or real estate or whatever scheme he was running that week. He started coming over for dinner 3 or 4 times a week. He would sit at the head of my table cutting the roast beef I paid for talking loud about asset protection and market trends. I did not like him. I never liked him. But Loretta insisted he was family. The conversations always turned to me. Gavin would look at me with this pitying expression that made my blood boil. He would say things like, "Booker, you are looking tired today, old-timer. Maybe you should go lie down while the adults talk business." He treated me like a child in my own home. Then came the paperwork. He brought over these thick binders full of legal jargon. He called it emergency guardianship. He told Loretta right in front of me that my mind was going and that I was a liability to myself. He said, "Booker, you do not want to lose everything because of a bad memory. Do you let us handle the heavy lifting?" I tried to protest. I tried to tell them I could still manage my own affairs. But my words came out slurred and confused. Loretta would just pat my hand and say, "Hush now, honey. Gavin is an expert. He only wants what is best for you." I felt trapped. I felt small. I could see them exchanging glances across the table. Glances that said he is almost gone. But deep down beneath the fog in my brain, a spark of the old Booker was still burning. The Booker who managed crews of tough men on the docks. I knew something was wrong. A man does not just lose his mind overnight unless someone is helping him lose it. That night, the house was silent in a way that felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. Loretta brought me my warm milk just as she always did. She smiled that sweet smile, the one I had fallen in love with 3 decades ago. But for the first time, I saw the tightness around her eyes. She placed the glass on my nightstand and told me to drink it all down so I would sleep soundly. She kissed my forehead and went to the bathroom to wash her face. I looked at the milk. Steam was rising from it, smelling faintly of nutmeg, and something else, something bitter, I had ignored for months. Beside my bed sat an African violet plant that I had bought for Loretta 2 years ago. It used to be vibrant and purple, but lately it had turned brown and brittle no matter how much water I gave it. I realized then that I had been pouring the dregs of my milk into that pot for weeks. The plant was not dying of thirst. It was being poisoned. With a hand that I forced to be steady, I poured the entire glass into the dry soil of the dying plant. I wiped the white ring from the inside of the glass with my thumb and licked it clean just to leave a trace so she would think I drank it. Then I lay back against the pillows and began to regulate my breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth, slow and rhythmic, just like I did when I was trying to sleep after a double shift at the warehouse. 10 minutes later, the bathroom door creaked open. I heard the soft padding of her slippers on the carpet. I kept my eyes closed, but my other senses were screaming. I could smell her lavender lotion. I could feel the displacement of the air as she moved closer. She did not get into her side of the bed. She stopped right beside me. I waited for the rustle of sheets, but it never came. She was just standing there watching me. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard, I was terrified she could hear it. I forced my body to go limp, to twitch my leg once as if I was in a deep dream. She leaned down. Her breath was hot against my ear. I expected a prayer or a term of endearment. Instead, her voice dropped to a hiss that sounded like a snake sliding through dry grass. "Die, you stubborn old man," she whispered. "Gavin says 2 more doses are all it will take for that tired heart of yours to finally stop. I am so sick of cleaning up after you and pretending to care about your pathetic stories." She straightened up, and I heard the tapping of fingers on a screen. She chuckled a low, dark sound that made my skin crawl, and then she walked out of the room, closing the door softly behind her. I lay there in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, as tears of pure rage rolled down into my ears. My wife, the woman I worked 40 years to provide for, was not just waiting for me to die. She was actively killing me. The next morning, the sun came through the blinds just like any other day, but the world looked different to me now. It looked gray and sharp. I heard Loretta in the kitchen humming a gospel tune while she made coffee. The hypocrisy made my stomach turn. I knew I had to play my part perfectly. If she suspected, I knew she would finish me off before I could make a move. I shuffled into the kitchen, dragging my feet, making my hands shake more than they actually were. I told her I felt dizzy and confused, that my chest felt heavy. She looked at me with mock concern and told me to go sit in the recliner while she went to the market to get fresh vegetables for my soup. As soon as the garage door closed, and her car pulled away, I dropped the act. The shaking stopped. The confusion vanished, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I moved faster than I had in years. I went straight to the home office, a room she and Gavin had taken over completely. I knew they were careless. Arrogance makes people sloppy. They thought I was a senile old fool who could barely find the bathroom, let alone decipher their schemes. I started with the trash can under the desk. Buried under some crumpled receipts and coffee grounds, I found a blister pack. It was empty. The label had been torn off, but there was a partial name printed on the foil backing. Digoxin. I ran to the computer and typed it in with fingers that trembled not from sickness, but from adrenaline. It was medication for heart failure. The side effects for an overdose listed on the screen hit me like a physical blow. Confusion, irregular heartbeat, nausea, visual disturbances. It was not dementia I was suffering from. It was poison. I kept digging. In the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, tucked inside a folder labeled Household Expenses, I found a document that made my blood run cold. It was a draft for emergency guardianship. It was dated 2 weeks ago and prepared by a notary I had never heard of. I read the legal jargon, and the plan was laid out in black and white. They were going to declare me mentally incapacitated. The document listed the facility where I would be sent. It was a state-run nursing home on the other side of the state, a place known for neglect and overcrowding. And under the section for assets, it listed my home, my bank accounts, and my pension to be liquidated immediately under the control of the guardian. The guardian was listed as Loretta, with Gavin named as the financial executor. They were going to throw me into a hole to rot while they sold the house I broke my back to build to fund Gavin's business. I sat back in the office chair, clutching that piece of paper, and for a moment, I felt like I couldn't breathe. The betrayal was so absolute it felt physical, like a knife twisting in my gut. 30 years. We had 30 years of memories, Christmas mornings, Sunday dinners, the time I carried her into the hospital when she broke her ankle, the time we renewed our vows. Was it all a lie? Had she always been this monster waiting for the right moment to strike? Or had Gavin poisoned her mind just like she was poisoning my body? I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the house apart. I reached for the phone to call 911, but my hand froze mid-air. What would I say? My wife is poisoning me. I looked at the evidence. An empty foil packet and a draft document. It was circumstantial. And then I looked at myself in the reflection of the computer monitor. I looked wild, unkempt. I had a documented medical history of paranoia and cognitive decline, a history she had carefully manufactured over the last 6 months with a doctor she chose. If the police came, she would put on her sweet, concerned wife act. She would show them my medical records. She would say I was having an episode. They would believe her. They always believed the crying wife over the angry, confused black man. They would institutionalize me right then and there, and I would be doing exactly what they wanted. I was trapped. I was alone in a house that had become a prison. And then the most painful realization of all hit me. Jamal. My son. 2 years ago, Loretta had come to me with tears in her eyes, claiming Jamal had stolen $500 from her purse. She said he was on drugs. She said he was dangerous. I confronted him. I didn't listen to his side. I trusted my wife. I screamed at my own flesh and blood and told him to get out and never come back. Jamal had looked at me with such hurt in his eyes, not because of the accusation, but because I didn't trust him. Now I saw the truth. There was no theft. Jamal wasn't on drugs. She had framed him. She needed him gone because Jamal was smart. Jamal would have noticed the pills. Jamal would have asked questions about Gavin. She had systematically cut off my support system until I was an island she could sink whenever she wanted. The shame washed over me hotter than the anger. I had failed my boy. But as I sat there listening to the silence of the empty house, I knew he was my only hope. I needed someone outside this house. I needed someone who hated Loretta as much as I was starting to. I reached into the back of the desk drawer, where I kept an old burner phone for emergencies, a habit from my days on the road. I prayed the battery still had a charge. It flickered to life. I dialed the number I had deleted from my main phone, but never from my memory. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I held my breath, praying he would pick up, praying it wasn't too late to fix the worst mistake of my life. The very next evening, Gavin arrived. He didn't knock. He just walked in with the entitlement of a man who thought he already owned the place. He was carrying a leather briefcase that looked expensive, but I noticed the handle was fraying just like his composure. He spread a stack of documents across my dining room table, pushing aside the coaster I had made in woodshop 20 years ago. He sat down and loosened his tie, looking at me with that smirk that made my fists itch. "Booker," he said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "We need to talk about the future. You are not getting any younger, champ, and let's be honest, you are not all there anymore." Loretta sat next to him, clutching a handkerchief, dabbing at dry eyes. She looked at me and said, "Please, honey, just sign the papers. Gavin wants to protect us. I don't want you to worry about bills or taxes in your condition." I looked at the papers. They were authorizing the immediate sale of the house and a full transfer of my pension into a managed trust controlled by Gavin. I looked closer at Gavin. He was sweating. It was 68 degrees in the house, but beads of sweat were gathering on his upper lip. His leg was bouncing under the table. I knew that look. I had seen it on men at the docks who owed money to loan sharks. Gavin wasn't doing this for me. He was desperate. He had probably gambled away his client's money or made a bad bet on the market, and now he needed my life savings to cover his tracks before he went to jail. He pointed a manicured finger at the signature line. "Just make your mark here, Booker," he said, speaking slowly like I was a toddler. "We will take care of the rest. You will be in a nice facility with round-the-clock care by next week." The audacity took my breath away. They were trying to bury me while I was still breathing, just to save his skin. I leaned forward. I let my hand shake just a little bit, then I stopped. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "No." The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Gavin's smile vanished. Loretta dropped the handkerchief. "You what?" Gavin asked, his voice dropping an octave. "I said no," I repeated. "I am not signing anything. Get out of my house." The transformation was instant. Loretta stopped pretending to cry. Her face twisted into a snarl that was pure, ugly hatred. She stood up and slammed her hand on the table. "You ungrateful old fool," she screamed. "We are trying to help you. If you don't sign this, you are going to rot here. Do you hear me? You are going to rot." Gavin stood up too, looming over me. "Listen to me, you senile wreck," he spat. "You have 2 choices. Sign the paper, or I make 1 phone call to my friend at the courthouse. We will have you declared mentally incompetent and dragged out of here in a straitjacket. You think anyone will believe you over us? You are a confused, sick old man." They stormed out of the dining room, but they didn't leave. That was when the real nightmare began. Loretta went to the thermostat and turned the heat off. It was mid-January in Atlanta, and the temperature was dropping below freezing that night. Then she went to the kitchen, and I heard the lock turn on the pantry door. "No dinner for you tonight, Booker," she yelled from the hallway. "Maybe hunger will clear your mind." I retreated to my bedroom, wrapping myself in every blanket I could find, but the cold seeped into my bones. My joints ached and my stomach growled. I lay there shivering, trying to conserve body heat. Then the music started. Heavy bass thumping through the floorboards. They were playing it from the living room directly under my bedroom. It was loud, relentless noise designed to keep me awake, to break my spirit. I lay there in the freezing dark, listening to the bass shake the pictures on my wall, pictures of a life that felt like it belonged to a stranger. Loretta came to the door once around 3 a.m. She didn't open it. She just yelled through the wood. "Sign the papers, Booker, or you die in there. I am the sole heir anyway. It is just a matter of time." I knew she was right. I couldn't survive a week of this. My heart was weak from the poison, and the cold was making it harder to pump blood. I was fading. I felt the darkness creeping in at the edges of my vision. But then a flash of anger cut through the fog. I worked too hard to die like a dog in my own house. I waited until the music stopped at dawn. I waited until I heard Loretta's heavy breathing from the guest room down the hall. I moved slowly, my limbs stiff and painful. I retrieved the burner phone from its hiding spot. My hands were trembling so bad, I almost dropped it. I dialed the number. It felt like a lifetime passed before he answered. "Hello?" The voice was deep and strong. It was Jamal. Tears instantly flooded my eyes, hot and stinging against my cold cheeks. "Jamal," I whispered, my voice cracking. "It is Dad." There was a silence on the other end. A silence heavy with 2 years of pain and estrangement. I braced myself for him to hang up. I wouldn't have blamed him. Instead, I heard him shift. "Dad," he said, cautious but present. I swallowed my pride. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Son, I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything. She is killing me, Jamal. She and Gavin. They are poisoning me and they are trying to take the house. I need help." I broke down, then sobbing quietly into the phone, terrifying sounds for a father to make to his son. I expected, and I told you so. I expected anger. But Jamal was not like them. He was a good man. A man I had raised before I let a snake whisper in my ear. "Stay put, Dad." Jamal said, his voice turning into steel. "I am coming." "No," I said, wiping my eyes. "You can't just come here. They have legal papers. They will call the cops and say I am crazy. We have to be smart. We have to trap them. I need you to do exactly what I say. Listen carefully." As I laid out the plan, I felt the strength returning to my body. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a father fighting alongside his son, and God help anyone who stood in our way. The next morning, I put on the greatest performance of my life. I shuffled into the kitchen, dragging my feet even more than usual, letting my head hang low like a beaten dog. Loretta was sipping her coffee, scrolling through online shopping sites, probably spending money she didn't have yet. I slumped into the chair across from her and let out a long, defeated sigh. "Loretta," I whispered, my voice trembling just the right amount. "I cannot take the cold anymore. I cannot take the hunger. You win, I will sign the papers." Her eyes lit up with a greed that was ugly to witness. She put down her phone and leaned in like a vulture spotting a carcass. "Are you serious, Booker?" she asked. I nodded slowly, wiping a fake tear from my cheek. "Yes, but I have conditions. I want it done this Friday night. Tell Gavin to bring his notary and tell him to bring $5,000 in cash. If I am going to a home, I want to buy my own snacks and toiletries. I don't want to beg you for pocket money." Loretta laughed, a cruel, triumphant sound. "Done," she said. "I will call him right now." She didn't even try to hide her excitement. She immediately dialed Gavin, and I heard her say, "Get the champagne ready, baby." The old man finally broke. They thought the drugs had turned my brain into mush. They had no idea that for the first time in months, I was thinking 5 steps ahead of them. The next 3 days were a blur of adrenaline and secret maneuvers. We had to be perfect. If Loretta suspected even for a second that I was lucid, the whole plan would fall apart. Jamal was the key. He worked as a high-level electrician and IT specialist, so he knew exactly how to handle surveillance. We waited for Loretta to leave for her salon appointment on Wednesday afternoon. She wanted to look her best for her victory party. The moment her car turned the corner, Jamal slipped in through the back door I had unlocked. Seeing my son again after 2 years almost broke my composure. He looked older, stronger, and his eyes were filled with a fierce determination. We didn't waste time with hugs yet. He went to work immediately. He installed micro cameras inside the smoke detectors in the living room and the dining room. He placed high-sensitivity microphones behind the family photos on the mantle. Every corner of the main floor was wired for sound and video streaming directly to a secure cloud server. While he worked, I executed my part of the plan. I found her stash of pills and swapped them out with harmless sugar pills I had bought from the pharmacy during a secret morning walk. I wasn't taking poison anymore. Jamal also became my lifeline for food. Since Loretta was starving me to keep me weak, Jamal started slipping high-protein energy bars and sandwiches through the bathroom window at night. I would eat them in the dark, chewing slowly, savoring the taste of real food, and feeling the strength return to my muscles. My hands stopped shaking for real, though I kept shaking them whenever Loretta was looking. The fog in my brain lifted completely. I could feel the old booker returning the man who could organize an entire shipping yard during a hurricane. I spent hours in my room not sleeping, but staring at the wall, visualizing exactly how Friday night would go. I rehearsed my lines. I practiced my bewildered old man face, but inside a fire was burning. It was the fire of justice. I wasn't just doing this for me. I was doing it for every person who had ever been underestimated because of their age or their race. I was going to show Gavin and Loretta that you do not mess with a man who has nothing left to lose. By Friday afternoon, I felt like a coiled spring ready to snap. Friday night arrived with a storm brewing outside, fitting weather for what was about to happen inside. Gavin arrived at 7 sharp, wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. He had the notary with him, a sweaty, nervous man named Pete, who I recognized as one of Gavin's drinking buddies. Loretta was dressed in a red gown, looking like she was going to a gala, instead of signing away her husband's life. They opened a bottle of expensive scotch and poured drinks for themselves, leaving me with a glass of tap water. They sat me at the head of the table, the same table where we used to have Thanksgiving dinners. Gavin slapped the thick file of documents down in front of me. "All right, Booker, let's get this over with," he said, his voice loud and condescending. "Sign where the sticky notes are and don't take all night. I have a reservation at the steakhouse to celebrate." Loretta giggled, clinking her glass against his. To a new future, she toasted. I picked up the pen, letting my hand tremble violently. I looked at the papers, pretending to struggle with the words. "So this gives you the house," I mumbled. Gavin scoffed, taking a sip of his scotch. "Yeah, Booker, it gives us the house. And don't worry, we are going to put it to good use. We already have a developer lined up. This old shack is going to be bulldozed next month. They are putting up luxury condos. I stand to make $2 million off the land value alone." He was bragging. He was so comfortable in his victory that he was confessing everything. I looked at Loretta. "And you are okay with this?" I asked, my voice cracking. "This is where we raised a family." Loretta rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, Booker," she spat. "I never liked this house. It smells like your work clothes. With $2 million, I can buy a penthouse downtown and finally live the life I deserve. I gripped the pen tighter. I needed one more thing. I needed the timeline. So I looked up at them, widening my eyes in feigned confusion. But why now? I asked. How long have you two been planning to do this to me? Loretta sighed, impatient to get to her steak dinner. She leaned across the table, her face twisted with malice. Since the day you retired, old man, she hissed. We thought you would have the decency to die of a heart attack soon after, but you just kept living. You were spending my inheritance on your medicine and your bills. We couldn't wait anymore. You lived too long, Booker. That is your problem. You just would not die. The room went silent. The cameras in the smoke detectors blinked silently, recording every word, every insult, every admission of guilt. I looked down at the paper, then I looked at the pen. I stopped shaking. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air so that finally felt clean. The act was over. It was time for the payoff. I looked at the signature line on the document one last time. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Gavin was leaning forward with that greedy smile plastered on his face, and Loretta was practically vibrating with anticipation. I lifted the pen. Then I let it drop. It hit the mahogany table with a sharp clatter that sounded like a judge's gavel coming down. I pushed my chair back and stood up. I did not stand up slowly, like the invalid they thought I was. I stood up with the power and speed of a man who had spent 40 years lifting heavy cargo. My back was straight, my shoulders were broad, and my hands were perfectly steady. The smile dropped from Gavin's face, instantly replaced by a look of confusion. Loretta gasped, dropping her wine glass. It shattered on the floor, staining the rug red, but she did not even look down. She was staring at me. I looked them dead in the eye and let my voice boom through the dining room deep and clear. I am not signing this paper, Gavin, not because I am confused, but because this paper is worth less than the dirt on the bottom of my shoe. Before they could even process the change in my demeanor, the kitchen door swung open. Jamal stepped out, his face set in stone, holding a laptop connected to the surveillance system. Behind him walked Sheriff Patterson, a man I had fished with for 20 years. He was in full uniform, his hand resting on his belt. Gavin scrambled to stand up, knocking his chair over. What is the meaning of this? He stammered, his voice rising an octave in panic. This is a private family matter. Sheriff Patterson shook his head slowly. Not anymore, son. Attempted murder and elder abuse are state matters, and we have seen and heard enough on this live stream to put you away for a very long time. Loretta turned pale, her skin looking like ash. She looked from me to the sheriff, then back to me. Booker, she whispered, her voice trembling. Baby, what is going on? You are sick. You do not know what you are doing. I laughed. It was a cold, harsh sound. I walked over to the buffet table where I had hidden a second folder earlier that day. I tossed it onto the table right on top of their useless legal papers. You two thought you were so smart, I said, pacing around them like a lion circling its prey. You thought you could drug an old man and steal his life's work. But for a financial advisor, Gavin, you are a terrible researcher. You wanted to sell my house next week, right? You wanted to pocket $2 million. Well, I have bad news for you. You cannot sell this house. Loretta looked at the folder, confused. What are you talking about? She screeched. It is our house. I leaned in close so she could see the fire in my eyes. No, Loretta, it is not. I transferred the deed to this house to Jamal 5 years ago, right after I retired. I retained a life estate, which means I have the right to live here until I die, but I do not own the property. Jamal does. Your signature is worthless. My signature is worthless. This house belongs to the son you tried to banish. You were poisoning me for an asset that was never going to be yours. Gavin looked like he was going to vomit. He grabbed the deed from the folder, scanning it frantically. His hands were shaking worse than mine ever did. "It is true," he muttered. "The title is in the kid's name. We cannot sell it." I wasn't done. I wanted to break them completely. "And that big life insurance policy you were counting on," I continued, pointing at Loretta. "The one worth $500,000. You were so busy buying designer clothes and treating this leech to fancy dinners that you forgot to check the autopay. You missed the premiums for the last 3 months, Loretta. The policy lapsed last week. It is canceled. You killed your marriage, you destroyed your family, and you tried to stop my heart, all for absolutely nothing. You get $0. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. They realized the magnitude of their failure. They had committed the ultimate sin, and the payout was absolutely zero. Sheriff Patterson stepped forward, pulling the handcuffs from his belt. The metallic click as they locked around Gavin's wrists was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Gavin started shouting about lawyers and entrapment, trying to throw his weight around, but the sheriff just pushed him toward the door. Then he turned to Loretta. She was not shouting. She was weeping loud, hysterical sobs that grated on my ears. She fell to her knees, reaching out for my leg. "Booker, please," she wailed. "He made me do it. I love you, Booker." I was confused. "Please do not let them take me. I am your wife." I looked down at the woman on the floor. I looked for a shred of the love I had carried for 30 years, but I found nothing. All I saw was a stranger who had whispered death into my ear while I slept. I stepped back out of her reach. "My wife is dead," I said, my voice flat and final. "She died the night she stood over my bed and wished for my heart to stop. You are just the woman who murdered her. Take her away, Sheriff." I watched from the front porch as they were led to the squad cars. The blue and red lights flashed against the houses of our neighbors who had come out to watch. I saw the shame on Loretta's face as she was shoved into the back seat. I saw Gavin's arrogance crumble into fear. As the cars drove away, fading into the night, I felt a heavy weight lift off my chest. The air tasted sweeter. The pain in my joints seemed to vanish. Jamal stepped up beside me and put a hand on my shoulder. "It is over, Dad," he said softly. I nodded, wrapping my arm around my son. "Yes, son. It is over. And for the first time in a long time, I am ready to really live." I turned my back on the empty street and walked back into my house, my home, ready to rebuild my life with the family that actually mattered. Looking back at those empty chairs where my wife and her brother-in-law used to sit, I realized something profound about the nature of evil. Money has a terrifying way of blinding the greedy until they cannot see the cliff they are walking off of. They thought I was weak because I was old, but they forgot that wisdom comes with age, and that a father's love for his son is a force that cannot be broken. The most dangerous enemy is often the one sleeping right next to you, smiling in your face while they sharpen the knife behind your back. So never let your guard down, not even for a second, because vigilance is the only shield we have left. If watching Gavin and Loretta get dragged away in handcuffs gave you the same satisfaction it gave me, please hit that like button right now. It shows me that you stand on the side of justice. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next story of truth and redemption. I want to know who is out there listening to my story, so tell me in the comments. What time is it where you are right now, and what city are you watching from? I will be reading every single one of them to thank you for standing with me. Stay safe out there and remember that justice always finds a way.